Yeah, go ahead.
So you just learn how to live with it. Oh. And then every once in a while you miss it.
Of all people to say that.
It was just so used to it.
Where did they find that quarterback the other day? Who was that guy? He's like a guy like,
Who's that?
play, I'm getting paid not to get it. I don't want any of this. Like, no go.
Yeah.
Is that where he came from? Let that guy try.
Yeah, and that was such a goofy deal because you have this, first round pick, or I guess it was first round, third round pick quarterback that's supposed to be potential QB of the future. And no.
She just keeps killing people. Yeah.
Didn't he break a bunch of records, or like have just stud numbers for
Oregon State or Florida?
I got cold toes. My toes are cold.
not the Beavers or the Ducks?
Okay.
Yeah, because I remember the hype being there, but just it never translated into
Short version. There's so many good quarterbacks out there that just really don't get a chance to really
well, yeah, like
prove
that.
themselves.
That Jordan Love. You wonder if that's going to be another Aaron Rodgers behind Brett Favre.
Man, if it is, you're one lucky organization.
Couldn't have happened to a worse group of people.
So we're supposed to lucked out there.
Yeah.
About that.
Oh yeah.
I plead ignorance.
Well, I don't think Aaron's going to have too many more years left. I think he's looking for the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Super Bowl or bust.
I do too. He barely came back this year, honestly. Well, maybe another good reason, right?
Yeah.
That should be on.
Okay, be careful. He was fine. I told him to shoot.
No, you're off.
Okay. You led me astray again.
I know. Don't follow me.
Oh, yeah. Start public comments, probably. Who's on first?
All I can say is the stuff is still rolling.
Yeah.
Now it's on. We're turning. Checking the roads right now. I registered at a blizzard this morning.
I better turn my Redskin ringtone off for later. That's how I picture it.
That's right.
Especially the Redskins.
Zane coming? It's 4:30.
Why can't he be gone now?
Yeah.
After
it's...
Okay.
Oh gosh.
Good afternoon, everyone.
See him every day.
Yeah.
It is 4:30. I'd like to begin. I'd like to start by standing for a moment of silence, and then we will follow that with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We can have a roll call, please.
P. Hamel.
Here.
Ken Snyder.
Here.
Brad Hant.
Here.
Wayne Barahona.
Here.
Tom Eggers.
Here.
Okay. Item 2 there is the approval of the agenda. I'll accept a motion for that.
So moved.
Support.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Hint.
Aye.
Snyder.
Aye.
Farahona.
Aye.
Hamel.
Aye.
Eggers.
Aye.
All right, item 3, I'd like to call Zane Roberts, newest police officer on the staff. You made her just in time. I'll meet you at the podium. Get you off. Okay. I, Zane Roberts, do solemnly swear
I, Zane Roberts, do solemnly swear
that I will uphold the laws, all laws of the Constitution of the United States,
that I will uphold all the laws of the Constitution of the United States,
the state of Iowa, and the city of Sheldon.
the state of Iowa, and the city of Sheldon.
I will faithfully and impartially,
I will faithfully and impartially,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
discharge all the duties of police officer
discharge all the duties of police officer
for the city of Sheldon, Iowa,
for the city of Sheldon, Iowa,
as now or hereafter,
as now,
required by law.
as here, or
As
now,
now.
as now or hereafter as required by law. Thank you.
If you were 30 seconds later, Tom was going to have to take your place, and it's going to be weird.
And I have just as much trouble with that as you did.
Sign it, and I'll get you a copy.
Steal yours if you want.
That would be they're redoing the station up at Howard, and then they're also doing the mental health area. This one. Yep, I'll approve the contract for last year.
All right, we now move into the public forum portion of our meeting. Is there anyone wishing to address the council at this time? Seeing no action there, we'll move on then into our consent agenda. You have that before you.
Move we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Support. Okay, we have motion and support. Is there any discussion? If not, roll call, please.
Eggers.
Aye.
Farahona.
Aye.
Hint.
Aye.
Snyder.
Aye.
Hamel.
Aye.
All right, moving on then to old business. We have with us a couple of people from Winther and Stave, Arv Druvinga, and I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Okay. Welcome, Arv. Will you be doing the talking?
Yep,
All right.
that'll be me tonight. So thank you. Yes, I am Arvin Dervinga, and Jen Mackey here as well. Jen was the manager in charge of the audit this year on behalf of Winther Stave and Company. We appreciate the opportunity to provide the audit services. I do want to make and pleased to make one announcement that Jen Mackey, along with two others in our firm, were promoted to the position of partner effective January 1st. So we welcome Jen continuing with us and in that new capacity as we go forward at our firm. So we have had the opportunity to serve as your auditor since 1994, and we appreciate the opportunity to provide these services each year. And it's been a great opportunity for us to serve the city of Sheldon. We appreciate the ability and opportunity to work with the staff over those number of years in a variety of different capacities. And it does provide us a wealth of information and institutional knowledge of the city and what is taking place as far as different aspects of the city, knowing ins and outs of what's taken place, some history behind things as far as urban renewal and bond issues, that sort of thing. So we feel that is a good way that has reflected our cooperation with the city over the last 25 plus years, and it's an opportunity to get to know staff and of the city as well as they get to know our procedures, and we work together to make a very efficient audit. So we thank Sam and Angie and the entire staff for their assistance and cooperation as we perform our procedures each year. We do provide 2 items to you, and the first is a thin 4-page letter, some items that are required by auditing standards to be communicated to you as those charged with governance, and it's a similar letter on an annual basis. If there were any particular issues or items that we felt necessary to draw to your attention, we would include them in that letter. We have a couple items that we'll touch on as we go through the audit report presentation, but nothing else of significance that we feel necessary to bring to your attention with regard to that letter. So in the bound audit report, we have just been able today to provide that in electronic form, the final version, and you may still have a draft version, but there were essentially only a couple cosmetic changes that were made to the draft. So whichever version you are looking at, page 2 through 4 is where we provide our independent auditor's report. It does have some explanatory information as far as the responsibility of management for the financial statements and our responsibility to provide audit procedures in accordance with the nationally accepted auditing standards. On page 3, there are a couple paragraphs that relate to component units, and it does indicate that there are certain items that from an accounting and auditing standpoint, some entities that would be considered component units and by the technical standards should be included in your audit report but are not. What is included here is what's considered the primary government of the city of Sheldon, and that would be essentially all the records and financial transactions that you are responsible for directly. So that's where we'll skip to the second from the bottom paragraph where it says unmodified opinions. This is the opinion that we give on the financial statements, that they present fairly in all material respects, the respective cash basis, the financial position of the governmental activities, business type activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of the primary government of the city of Sheldon as of June 30, 2021, and the changes in cash basis financial position, all of this on the cash basis of accounting. So that's the highest level of opinion that we are able to provide, would be considered a clean opinion with regard to the primary government of the city of Sheldon. There are a couple levels of financial statements provided. Page 5 and 6 is what's considered a government-wide financial statement perspective. This looks at governmental activities and business type activities in total. And near the bottom of the page, there's a change in cash basis net position, beginning of the year net position, and the cash basis net position at the end of the year, shown for governmental activities and business type activities in total, and then a grand total with a breakdown of the cash basis net position at the bottom of the page by those that are restricted and those funds that are unrestricted for each of those. The more traditional format starts on page 7. 7 and 8 is the governmental funds. This is the format that you would budget and you would typically look at your financials, so I'll spend a little bit more time on that. And on this page, there's receipts and disbursements at the top portion of the page, then other financing sources. Then the third line from the bottom is the net change in cash balances beginning of the year and the ending cash balances. And as you go across, the major funds are presented: government or general, tax increment financing, local option sales tax, road use, debt service, capital projects, and then The second to the last column is all other non-major governmental funds with a grand total. So the third line from the bottom for each of those funds, you can see where the net change in cash balance was for the year. The general fund increased approximately $531,000. Tax increment financing, due to quite a large amount of transfers out, that did have a decrease of $813,000. Local option sales tax, a small decrease of $5,000. Road use tax increased $32,000. Debt service increased $73,000. And in capital projects, there was an increase of $1.5 million due in part to bond proceeds. And then all the non-major governmental funds increased by $177,000. So in total, there was an increase of approximately $1.5 million, leaving an ending balance of $9.3 million for the governmental funds. Now that is broken down, that grand total, on pages 9 and 10, again by each of the funds, but here it is shown by category of restricted, committed for, assigned for, and then the second from the bottom line is the unassigned. That would be the discretionary spending that you would have available. All the other amounts have been either restricted, committed, or assigned for particular items. So you can see how those lay out from the various funds. And in the general fund, then it does result in an unassigned balance of $410,000 this year, which is an improvement from where that level had been in prior years. Moving back just a couple pages, pages 12 and 13, the same types of items are shown here for the proprietary funds, water, sewer, and then a column for the internal service self-insurance fund, laid out very similarly. And here the net change in cash balance, third line from the bottom, water had an increase of $132,000, sewer an increase of $253,000, with a total change of $384,000, leaving cash balance at the end of the year of approximately $3.9 million for the enterprise fund. And again, the categories are shown on page 13 that break that down by some restricted amounts for debt service and water deposits, and then the remaining unrestricted balances that can be used inside each of those enterprise funds. If there are any questions, please feel free to stop me. We did have the opportunity to go through the draft report earlier with Sam and Angie and Mayor Geels and a couple of council members, so I will just skip ahead through the footnotes.
Before you go on.
Briefly, yes, unless there's a question.
Back on page 9, looking in there, or excuse me, page 7, I pulled out, I have in my drawer here the 2019, not last year, but 2 years ago, the report there. The cash balance at the end there was 1.136. We're now at 1.87. And at that time, it was labeled as, I have in quotes, pretty healthy. So I'm wondering now, if that was pretty healthy, how would you classify this one in the layman's terms?
Yeah,
Is that really healthy or somewhat healthy?
Yeah, the cash balance level that you have is definitely adequate for the requirements of the city. But you do have the significant portion of your cash balances identified for particular purposes. So that is the constraint that you have. So that's where that unassigned level of $410,000, it does provide a little more flexibility than what you had last year when that was a smaller amount. So that's positive in that it does reflect some greater flexibility that you have, and that you've maintained your revenues in excess of expenditures during the year to that degree.
Very good.
Thank you. Yep. Sure. Moving on to page 20, this is where the bonds and notes payable are shown. And because the financial statements are on the cash basis, they do not reflect the debt of the city, so that's why I do want to draw attention to the items listed here at the top of page 3 is where the general obligation and tax increment financing, the airport loan, those last two, which both were paid off during the year, but the general obligation bonds that ended the year at $8.6 million with approximately $900,000 due in the next year. And then for the water revenue and sewer revenue notes, you can see approximately $320,000 were paid during the year, and with an ending balance of $7.7 million and approximately $330,000 that are due to be paid in the current fiscal year budget. Then below that, the general obligation bonds are shown by individual bond issue, the maturities and interest rates that are associated with each of the next 5 years, and then in 5-year increments following thereafter. Additional background information related to the general obligation bonds are shown on the bottom of page 21, their inception and the purpose behind them. On page 22, we do note that the tax increment financing bonds and airport loan were paid in full during the year, and then we do provide information on the revenue notes in a similar way with the maturities and the interest rates for each of the individual loans. There are some restrictions in the resolutions for the revenue loans. Those are explained as well on the bottom of page 23 into page 24. And then the final note that I will draw your attention to on page 25 is the interfund transfers. Primarily this is comprised of the tax increment financing amounts that are transferred to the debt service fund in recognition of the amounts paid for items that can be paid out of the tax increment financing revenues that are initially paid from the debt service fund. Then there are various other smaller transfers that are made following that. The next page I'll ask you to look at is on page 37 and 38. On page 37, we show the actual results of the governmental funds and proprietary funds with a total of the actual results as shown earlier. Then on page 38, the original and final budgets are reflected, and there's a final to actual variance amount that is shown. Disbursements is where there's a statutory requirement to maintain your expenditures within the amounts that were budgeted, and that is the case, as you can see on page 38, the far right-hand column. All of the items under disbursements are positive amounts or positive variances. Revenues came in approximately $518,000 less than budgeted, but the total disbursements were a little over $3 million less than were budgeted. So increased with a very positive variance of approximately $2.5 million in an increase in cash position, net cash position over what was budgeted. You maintained your expenses well within budgeted levels. And then we do provide a second report on internal control and compliance. The report is on page 45 and 46, but then following that, what is referred to in that report is a schedule of findings that starts on page 47. There are the potential for findings related to the financial statements. In part 1 on page 47, there were note items that we felt met the criteria to be reported in that section this year, so there are no findings. And then on page 48, there's a section, part 2, relates to statutory findings that the state auditor has required comments to be made on. Some of them, whether or not we have findings, but we are to make either a positive or negative comment. So there's just a couple that do show up. That first on page 48, 21-2A, we did have one comment regarding the budget. There were certain expenditure areas that were exceeded prior to the budget being adopted, budget amendment, being adopted. So they exceeded it, but then subsequently there was the budget amendment made, so at the end of the year they were within budgeted amounts. And then at the bottom of that page, 21-2D, we're required to show transactions between the city and city officials or employees. So those are listed there. There is a threshold of $6,000 that under that there's not considered to be, just by definition, not any potential for a conflict of interest. The other ones, a couple slightly over 6,000, and one weighs larger than that, could potentially reflect conflict of interest by definition, and that's where we do give our comment on the top of page 49 to enter into bidding agreements or procedures if that's felt warranted, in order to make sure that you are spending your funds in the appropriate levels regarding those particular transactions. And then one item, a final item, they'll address on page 50. The State Auditor's Office has made quite an emphasis this past year on payments that go to nonprofit organizations, and we do indicate here, and the city has made some contributions to those types of organizations and payments to them over the year. The State Auditor's Office has laid out some criteria from the Constitution and certain Attorney General positions, cautioning how those payments are structured, and does indicate in some situations there would not be statutory authority to make payments to not-for-profit organizations, but there are also situations where it can be documented and structured in such a way that they are permissible. And for the most part, many of your agreements and payments are subject to either 28E agreements or other contractual arrangements where it is specified what the purpose of the payments are and how that fits into the requirements that city funds be used for public purpose and available to the entire public and citizens of the city. And then there were a few that I think some additional analysis is still being done on a small scale to determine whether those funds would need some additional documentation to support the payments that are made, and I think that's an ongoing situation. But for the most part, this is just an item we want to bring to your attention as a council, to realize that there are certain restraints on how payments can be made, and just for information primarily, and to realize there is some ongoing work being done to clarify a couple of the smaller levels of contributions. So that would conclude my comments regarding the report. Again, we appreciate the opportunity to continue as your audit providers, and certainly would wish to continue that in the future, and we appreciate the relationship that we have and the opportunity to serve the citizens. Any questions?
Sam has a question or comment. Arvin, could you talk briefly about some of the items that you have on file in your office that make it easier for you to do our audits? You mentioned it earlier, but could you spend a moment elaborating on that, please?
Yeah, I did make some reference. Certain items are longer term items that if you came in and did an audit for the first time, you would not have access or familiarity with that information, such as long-term debt agreements and bond issues that are in place, realizing the background, the maturities, if there are compliance restrictions and bond resolutions related to those, and then tax increment financing, where you have urban renewal districts that have been set up, you have different types of financing and developer agreements that have been set into place. Those are things that last over a long period of time, and are things that we are familiar with, having done the audit for the number of years that we have. And then other than that too, in addition to that, it's just a knowledge of how things work in the office, how the flow of information takes place, what documents are available, what reports are generated easily on the by the computer system, and who to go talk to about what types of questions. So it's just familiarity with the personnel and the relationships that have been built over that course of time, where we speak the same language, if you want to call it that. We refer to the same documents in the same way, know how things are handled internally.
But that information would be available to any accountant.
It-
They
it-
would just have to research it.
Right, it would be available, it just is not something that they would have on hand coming into doing the audit. They would be things that the city would have to, city personnel would need to come, pull together and make additionally available to them. They would need those items as part of conducting the audit. Yep, exactly.
Just want to say I appreciate the timeliness of the work done.
I do have a couple questions. This goes back to our earlier interview, our meeting a couple weeks ago, and it was asked about the fraud interview. Who are the people that you called for the fraud interview? You didn't have that handy, and you were going to look up that information.
Well, we did bring it up as we discussed the draft with each of you.
Yeah, but Sam asked the question,
Okay.
who you interviewed, and you didn't have that answer, so I'm asking the question now.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. I don't know, Jen, if you did look at that. I neglected and forgot that we had talked about that. I'm sure Angie was one of them initially.
Oh, okay,
Okay, yeah. So
kind of vague. The other question I have is, how long before this audit will be posted to the state's website? It seems like over the history, it's been several months after we approve it before it gets.
Right, we typically will submit that as soon as we wrap up a couple internal items. We electronically submit that to the state auditor's office. At that point, we are just subject to however their internal situation is for getting it posted to the website. But we would make that available to them in the course of the next couple weeks as we finalize our audit procedures.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your
Thank
time
you both
tonight.
for your work and your presentation today.
Need a motion to accept.
And at this point, we will need a motion to accept the audit as presented.
So move.
Support.
Further discussion? Questions? Roll call, please.
Farahona?
Aye.
Eggers?
Aye.
Hand?
Aye.
Hamel?
Aye.
Snyder?
Aye.
All right. Let's move on then to first item under our new business, 7A, public hearing on the ordinance amendment to adopt new city ward boundaries. I'd like to open that hearing now. Are there any comments or questions from anybody? Have we received any written comments or questions?
No.
Seeing no one stepping forward, I'd like to take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved. Support.
Roll call, please.
Snyder?
Aye.
Farahona?
Aye.
Eggers?
Aye.
Hamel?
Aye.
Hand?
Aye.
So then we have a first reading of the ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances of the City of Sheldon by amending provisions of Section 3.01 pertaining to ward boundaries. Sam, do you want to speak to that at all?
The map itself is identical. The meets and bounds and the legal description has changed a little bit to include more descriptive language as recommended by the County Auditor's Office and Secretary of State. So,
I'll move we accept first reading and waive second and third.
Support.
Further discussion or questions? Roll call, please.
Hamel?
Aye.
Snyder?
Aye.
Farahona?
Aye.
Hand?
Aye.
Eggers?
Aye.
And then the final item there would be to rescind the ordinance we passed on December 15. This is an update to that ordinance. Take a motion for that, please.
So moved.
Support.
Questions? Roll call, please.
Snyder?
Aye.
Hand?
Aye.
Farahona?
Aye.
Eggers?
Aye.
Hamel?
Aye.
All right, then we move on to the next item, a resolution approving the early retirement agreement with Police Officer Rob Hagenbarth.
The explanation, the resolution is there. Motion to approve that resolution.
So moved.
Support.
Take your pick, okay. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Snyder?
Aye.
Hamel?
Aye.
Hint?
Aye.
Eggers?
Aye.
Farahona?
Aye.
Passing that passes the retirement agreement as general release as well, correct? Understand that right? That basically takes care of that. I would just like to thank Rob for his service, for the many years he has been a part of the department, and wish him well, whatever future endeavors he has. Moving on then to item C, a resolution of the reappointment and establishing compensation for City Attorney Micah Scrouse. You have Sam's exclamation there. You have a 3-year proposal, as I recall. What it will do for over the next 3 years. That resolution is there and states those amounts.
Make motion we approve.
I'll take one of those as a second.
Support.
Third.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Sorry.
Approving the 3-year resolution.
Correct.
Okay.
Are there any comments or questions on that? If not, I'll take a roll call, please.
Hamel?
Aye.
Hint?
Aye.
Farahona?
Aye.
Eggers?
Aye.
Snyder?
Aye.
All right, moving on then to our reports. Sam, you have an update on the auditor selection?
I do, thank you, Mayor. So I have my explanation there. I also attached the RFP. See the last page of the RFP for the auditor eval form, which is fairly subjective, except for 25% of it is the price. And then I also linked all 3 proposals. So when Angie and I put the RFP together, we thought we'd be able to make a recommendation at today's meeting with everything else we have going on. We checked with the League of Cities and the rules on when this needs to be awarded, and we have plenty of time and we'd like to take more time. I can tell you that based on the limited due diligence that we've done so far, I think it would be difficult to make a change. I think the difference between the first and the second proposals is only a few $1,000s. I think we'd probably spend a fair amount more than that getting up to speed. But I think that we owe it to the process to go through the criteria and come back to the council for further discussion. I have talked to 2 cities, one who had switched from Winther and Stave to TP Anderson, and another who had switched from another firm to TP Anderson. And based on my conversations with both, I'm inclined to believe that we would be better suited to stay with who we have, especially considering the positive changes that they have made in their processes over the last couple of years. Winther and Stave has made. So those are my initial thoughts, and I would appreciate your input. Like I said, this is fairly subjective. When you look at the last page, you know, we have a fair amount of flexibility.
This criteria sheet, the last page you're talking about, as far as rating, is there anything that reflects local versus out of town? Does that enter into the equation?
I think number 6 does a little bit. with the distance. One of the feedback I'd received from one of the other communities was, concerns over the number of questions sent by email by one of the other auditors, rather than addressing those questions when they were on site. And so I think that wasn't a factor with winter and stay, but that was a factor with one of the other candidates. So indirectly, Mayor, can consider it from that standpoint, but directly, geography is not something to be rated. There was an issue with one of the things that Angie and I saw with TP Anderson was that a lot of their audits were uploaded or sent to the auditor's office many months after they were presented, and that was a concern for Angie and I have raised that issue to TP Anderson, which they're addressing. So I wouldn't say they're permanently disqualified, but I think based on the factors I'm seeing, I'm leaning pretty strongly towards recommending staying with who we have.
Yes, I stated this in our previous meeting, and I'm going to state it here again just because I think it's important to consider. We do have a local Sheldon chamber members, people who live here, work here, have served on committees and such. Across the hall to the west, we have a chamber organization that preaches shopping local all the time, and I believe in that. I think that's the correct approach. And I'm not saying that it's the be-all, end-all factor that we decide this on, but if we are going to factor in these different things, I think that shopping local, being preached across the hall, needs to be practiced as much as we can practically in the city office as well. So that's my only comment on that. So at this time, you would just like to table this?
Well, I think we need to elaborate on this a little bit more because
Okay.
I think ultimately
But we can't take no action on it.
No, but I think your input's really important. I mean, I've signaled to you the direction that I'm leaning, but I completely understand where the mayor's coming from, and I think you could probably make a justification for the third place finish, because it's a third place finish only in terms of price, and price is 25%. This is the first time in my knowledge that we've had a situation like this. So that's why I'm bringing it to you in the way that I am.
And I'll say it out there, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, last year, we had issues with winter and stave. We weren't happy with them. I think it's opportunity to look at a different firm, different eyes. They all know the numbers. They know where to get the numbers from. It's just going to be a little bit different for the city girls because they're going to have new people to work with. I'm disappointed with they don't have questions to the answer I asked them, and I'm just wondering if they're doing their due diligence on the whole audit. So I would suggest, yeah, I mean, that's my 2 cents. I think we need to look at a different firm.
Sam, this criteria that you have, is this something that comes from, like, the auditor? Is this a League of Cities thing?
State Auditor's website.
So, while we have to, how am I trying to say this? While we really do put an emphasis on the local aspect, this is going to be something that is subject to review by the auditor, is that correct? Or is this just just a guideline?
It's a guideline. It is potentially subject to review if there was a complaint raised to the state auditor. And again, in my limited due diligence that I've done, I am aware of at least one situation up in Lyon County where the governing body simply made the motion saying we want to stay local. And it ultimately wasn't challenged. It was accepted. So, I think if we were going to do that, then my thought would be is we set a hearing for a future date, which we're not required to do a hearing on it. But if you set a public hearing, allow people to speak on it, have a little bit more discussion on it, and then make a motion to approve, then that gives you some added credibility to make a change. We've done that before on situations where the answer isn't clear up front.
I mean, overall, if you just look at the cost between Winter and Williams, in the end, it's over $1,700 over the 3-year period. So I'm not really, in my mind, I'm not real too concerned about the cost of it here. I have been around here to experience the worst of winter, and I meant the comment I meant to him, that I appreciated that he had it on time, but I'm not sure I really need to tell an auditor that. That's not a compliment as an auditor that I think I want to get. I think that's something that's expected. If you look at the rate of increase with Williams in regards to the pricing of Winter, you see that Winter's pretty steep in comparison. Williams starts off higher and maintains a more moderate rate of increase, which to me tells me that it's more long-term. And so I think we really should consider Williams as a true candidate here. There are more benefits than just the good ones that the chamber promotes to do this. I mean, they have accountability to their own community as well, and so I think there's some good aspects of that could pay off for the city as well. So I would be very much interested in hearing more about how Williams compares to our existing provider, and probably at this point would
In terms of
favor them.
services offered, or
Huh?
you're talking not something beyond price, you're talking services offered, or
Say it again.
you're talking in terms of services, comparing, you're not just talking price, you're talking beyond that.
I'm talking price first, just to put that in perspective, which isn't really as much as you think it is. And then with that out of the way, I think the service aspect of it, and the fact that, they're a business within our town. And you do business in town, and they take pride in doing that too, I take it. So I think we'll get a job well done. Long as you can work with them, because I don't want Angie and the people not be able to work with who we choose. But if we feel that we can do that, then I think we should strongly look at it. So. The return on investment is there, is what I'm trying to say.
I guess Kurt, the SCDC uses Williams and Company. Well, how do you feel about them?
Yeah, we do use Williams and Company. We've used them for 3 years now. They've served us well. Yep.
I'll take this under advisement, and I will make some calls to references and cities that Williams serves now, and go from there. Not sure if this will be coming back on the 19th, but it'll be probably sometime in February. And I'd recommend when it comes back, I'll initial report, and then we set a hearing for the following meeting.
Very good.
Ready to move on? Right. Is there anything else in your report that you would like to bring out at this time?
No, sir.
All right. Down the list. Todd, anything from you? Okay. Kurt? Chief Birch? Angie?
Nope, I'm good.
Micah?
No, thank you.
Council to my left, any comments? To my right?
No, sir.
All right. I don't know if you saw the paper today, Live Healthy Iowa starts, and the NCC is also involved in that. There is still time. You missed the deadline for early bird registration, but you can still register. I think it's important that we promote health and well-being at this level throughout the community. So there's my pitch. That's all I have.
Make the motion to adjourn.
Support.
Roll call, please.
Hamel.
Aye.
Snyder.
Aye.
Hint.
Aye.
Farahona.
Aye.
Eggers.
Aye.